Greetings, Purana readers. Welcome. I am Patrick Olivelle. My columns and brief videos are intended to open up the world of ancient India to contemporary Indians. In this first episode of Purana, we encounter a strong and brilliant woman from ancient India, a true trailblazer. She can well be called the first woman philosopher of India, at least the first one we have some information about. Her full name is Gargi Vachaknavi. You may ask why I decided to open this series with an episode involving a woman. I could ask you in turn if you would have asked the same question if I started with a man. History has unfortunately relegated women in ancient India to a footnote. They are invisible presences in the landscape of ancient Indian history. I want to bring them to the foreground. Curiously and significantly, when King Janaka, better known as the father of Sita, invited prominent Brahmins of the time to celebrate a ritual and engaged in a philosophical debate, Gargi was included. Why? The narrator seems to take this as normal. At least her gender is not singled out for comment. That is curious and should draw our attention. A woman in a group of male philosophers and priests. That is quite odd. At least it seems odd to us who have absorbed the general platitudes about gender roles in ancient India. What role, if any, did she play in the ritual itself? We are not told. It soon becomes clear, however, that Gargi was not just a token woman in the assembly. She asserted herself as its leader through the power of her intellect and the force of her personality. Gargi was part of a team of major philosophers of the time, posing questions to Yajnavalkya to debunk his claim to be the most learned in the group. After all the assembled philosophers had asked their questions and failed to expose a chink in Yajnavalkya's armor, Gargi returns to question him a second time. She claims the leadership of the group and tells her colleagues that she will pose two questions, and if Yajnavalkya can answer them, then none of them will be able to defeat him. After her second questioning of Yajnavalkya, she turns to her male colleagues and tells them, "Distinguished Brahmins, you should consider yourselves lucky if you escape from this man by merely paying him your respects. None of you will ever be able to defeat him in a theological debate." Reading this narrative, we begin to have a few questions of our own. How did a woman get invited in the first place to participate in a ritual sacrifice that Janaka was preparing to perform? Generally, we are told only male Brahmins were allowed to officiate as priests. Or is this another common assumption about ancient India that we must revisit? It must have been a big deal to be invited to the royal court to participate in a public philosophical debate. How did Gargi make the cut? Surely, as a woman, the bar may have been even higher than for her male colleagues. This makes it likely that Gargi's reputation for philosophical acumen must have been high and widespread. Finally, why did the 7 male philosophers silently acquiesce when Gargi laid claim to the leadership of the group? These are questions that the narrative does not answer. They do, however, force us to question some common assumptions about the role of women in ancient Indian society and culture, often defined as wife and mother. Gargi forces us to come to grips with the intellectual life of women in ancient India. In this connection, there is a significant passage in the Dharma Sutra of Apastamba, the oldest Dharmashastric text we have, and probably composed during the time of Ashoka. A passage that attaches importance to the knowledge that women possess. In the context of marriage, for example, after describing the ceremonies, he asked the readers to, and I quote, do whatever else the women asked them to do, unquote. At the end of his treatise, furthermore, Apastamba says, and I quote, the knowledge found among women constitute the final conclusion, unquote. That knowledge supplements and completes his own treatise. Women in this context become teachers of those aspects of Dharma not addressed by Apastamba. Women are guardians and transmitters of traditional knowledge. Turning back to Gargi, here is an exceptional woman, a philosopher with sharp wit and abounding in self-confidence. We must be grateful to the composers of the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad for preserving the memory of this great woman. But we can be sure that many other Gargis lived in ancient India. They were not as lucky as Gargi in finding writers and transmitters of knowledge, almost always men, who would incorporate their stories. They have passed into oblivion. Recently, Charles Hallisey of Harvard University produced a wonderful translation of the Buddhist text Theri Gatha, the songs of elder Buddhist nuns, published in the Murthy Classical Library of India. This anthology presents the earliest collection of poetry written by women. Women represent the largest subaltern group of pre-modern India. Historians must work harder to recover the voices of women wherever they may lie buried. They are there only if we search with vigor and patience. Gargi is unique in that she is not simply an anonymous woman, as many are. She has a name and at least a skeletal narrative that gives her a voice. And did she ever employ her voice, loud and clear, to speak publicly, to engage in subtle philosophical disputes, and to challenge her male, patriarchal, and probably arrogant colleagues? It is surprising then that later authors would deny women the right to undergo Vedic initiation or to study the Vedas. The Gargi episode offers us all a salutary warning not to take what is given in text always as social reality.